Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So on today's video, we're going to be working on the GX470 again. I need to do a transmission fluid flush. So on today's video, we'll go ahead, do a flush, drain everything, refill it. While we're in there, I'm going to go ahead and drop the pan, replace the strainer, and just clean out the bottom of the pan just in case there's any residue or just basically 17 years worth of use on here and 130,000 miles. So stay tuned and we'll go at today. To do this transmission flush on the GX, we needed 16 quarts of world standard ATF. I decided to go with the OEM just because you only do this every once in a while, and I just stick with the OEM. It's lasted for 130,000 miles and over 16 or 17 years in the transmission, so I'll just go ahead and do this. A lot of people go with the Valvoline stuff. I decided just to go with this. I paid basically 15% off retail on one of the most recent Toyota sales, and I picked it up locally at my dealer that had the sale on their online website. There is a 25% off one right now actually while I'm doing this. I'm gonna go ahead and pick up probably like 20 or 24 quarts for my other vehicle. During that same 15% off sale, I went ahead and picked up a gasket for the transmission pan. I picked up the strainer and the O-rings. A lot of this is probably not mandatory, but since the car is 17 or 18 years old now, I'm gonna go ahead and just replace that strainer. Usually these things don't go bad, but it's just cheap insurance since I'm already gonna be in there. I'm gonna go ahead and replace that. You need the O-ring, the big O-ring for that. The small O-ring is actually for the fill plug. I'm gonna go ahead and replace that just in case. A lot of people don't replace that because again, that's not something that's under pressure, so usually the O-ring is perfectly fine. A few other tools we're gonna need. I have both this suction gun right here, so this basically you could just suck up the fluid and then pump it out. It's got about 16.9 ounces worth of capacity, so you could fill that up. That's about half a quart. Over here we also have this transfer pump, so we can actually pump out of a bottle into the actual transmission or into the cooler. So one of the things we're gonna do is we're gonna pump the fluid back in through the cooler right here on the front of the vehicle. This is the easiest way to do the flush. You can flush out and flush back in using that connection right there at the top of the cooler. So that's one of the methods we're gonna do when we get into the actual fluid flush. So underneath the vehicle, we basically have the pan here. This is the world standard pan where we have the check valve and then we have the drain. We'll go ahead and drain this into a pan, measure how much we take out, and then we're gonna refill it down here after we drop the tank and change everything. We're gonna refill it. We're gonna fill it right there over here where there's a fill plug. It's got a WS on it for world standard. That's the fill plug. So we'll fill that down here with whatever we take out. From there, we'll do that whole flush on the front. So the first thing we're gonna do is we'll go ahead, drain this right here, and then after that, we'll go ahead, take off all the 10 millimeters and drop the pan down. First thing we're gonna do is go ahead and drain it into the pan here. It's a 14 millimeter drain bolt back here. Go ahead, release that, drain into this pan, so that way we can measure how much we take out. So it takes about 5 minutes for that thing to drain fully to a little drip right there. So once you do that, you should have a pretty significant amount in the tub. It's about 2 quarts. So we'll go ahead and measure that once we drop the pan and get all of it into there. Before we put the drain plug back in, you want to replace the crush washer. So just in case you didn't know or you didn't pay attention, the one that's on here has a flat side against the bolt and then the crush side against the pan, so you could just put the new one in the same orientation and then tighten it back up on the pan itself. Next thing we want to do, go ahead, take apart all the 10 millimeters all around so we can drop the pan. All right, once you unbolt most of the bolts, I left 2 in case this thing drops, but it's pretty much going to be sealed with the gasket on here, so you might have to pry it off. So I'll go ahead and take those 2 off, get the pan back underneath so I can dip it and pour whatever I can into the pan once I drop it, so we don't get anything all over the place. Once we drop that pan, it does come apart pretty easily. It's not really sealed up on there that tight. I just wiggled it a little bit, pried it with a little flathead, and it came right off. So when you do drop it, there is still a significant amount of fluid still in the tank or in the pan there, as you can see. And once you look up there, it's still dripping off the pickup tube and the strainer. So you just let that all kind of drip out. You could just go ahead and wipe it so you keep it from dripping, because we're going to be dropping that thing anyways. So once we stop the dripping, I'll go ahead, pour it into my bin right there so we can fill up the gallon or so and see how much we need to put back in once we put this pan back up. Keep the dripping. I'll go ahead and just wipe off all this stuff right here. You can see it goes off. Even though it looks clean, there is a lot of like years worth of just metal and grinding in this fluid. That's all the black stuff right here that I get onto my little orange towel, but that's just the normal transmission, just gears wearing over time. We'll go ahead, pour it into the big pan. So here's what the inside of the pan looks like with nothing in it. There's 4 magnets right there, as you can see. We'll go ahead, clean this all up with some super clean, peel off the old gasket right here that we don't need anymore because we're gonna be replacing. Make sure the gasket surfaces are nice and clean after that when you're done, and get this thing all prepped to go put back up once we change out that strainer. So I cleaned out the first 2 magnets, and you can see all that old sediment and just grindings and everything. That's all that black stuff. If you look closely on here, that little bump and everything that you see on top of those magnets, that's just all the gears and all the metal shavings that have attracted to these magnets over the years. Inside the pan here, you'll see this little part right here, which is kind of raised up. This is your check valve, and that's really to check the level. So what happens is when you check the level and the vehicle's on the ground at operating temperature, this thing should overflow with the fluid that needs to come out of here at operating. All right, went ahead, cleaned everything up, clean magnets back in there into their spots. As you can see, I put the new gasket on here. It only goes on one way because this thing is not a square. It's kind of got a little curve right there, so it goes on one way. You want to just set it on there, let it kind of settle out and get back to its form. If you want to, you can put a little bit of grease on some of these corners just to kind of hold it while you're putting it back up. That way it just squeezes out later and it just gets out of the way. But overall, you could just leave it like this. I've seen some people put like some kind of gasket stuff or some kind of grease and stuff to hold it in place, but I think I'm just gonna try to push it back up, because once it lines up, you know, you get in the hole, you kind of just, it has to be in the hole, so it's gonna be in the right spot anyways. So I'm gonna go ahead, take down the old strainer right here. It's got 4 12 millimeters all around it. Go ahead, take those things off and then pop it out. There's an O-ring up here that goes into that spot. You can see it's still dripping some fluid. We'll go ahead, try to wipe that along the way so that way it doesn't make a huge mess. But I still have the pan below us to kind of let everything drip out anyways. Those are actually 10 millimeters up there. All right, here's a strainer right out here. You can see the O-ring that we're going to be replacing that goes on top right here. This thing pretty much sits in oil all the time, so it doesn't really get dried out. But overall, you can see like all the years worth of just sediment and everything sits on top of here. That's all just grindings and everything that comes off the transmission. And then inside and everything, I'm not sure exactly how this strainer works, but it probably does catch big chunks of stuff in there, so, and it stays inside somewhere, but we'll go ahead and replace it. These things are pretty cheap considering how infrequently we change these things out. Really not much prep. Put the O-ring on, put it back up, and screw it back in. All right, next thing we need to do is go ahead and get the pan back up in here, line up the gasket, and start hand threading all the 10 millimeters in. Make sure you hand thread in so you don't strip anything. Make sure it goes in pretty good before you start shooting it. Once you kind of start getting them threaded, I did the 4 corners and a few others, so I'm gonna go ahead, go do all of them now in a time lapse for y'all. All right, I went ahead and tightened all the bolts. You gotta be careful with these bolts. What you're doing is you're tightening down a gasket. So as you tighten other ones, you start loosening the ones you did before just because the gasket's compressing down. So you're just gonna go over it like 2 or 3 times, make sure it's snug. And then what I did was I got it snug and then I did maybe another quarter turn at most. You don't wanna go too strong and snap it. So I just held the ratchet kind of in the middle where the extension was versus on the end where I'm putting leverage on it. So that's pretty much done. We'll go ahead and wipe this thing clean, all the residue and everything, and then we'll go ahead and fill it once we match what we have down here. All right, I went ahead, put it over here. So I got about a gallon out of here, and then I still have probably like a half quart or a quarter quart left. So that's a lot more than I expected out of the pan, but I guess that's really the drain, which is about 2 to 2.5 plus whatever's in the pan that doesn't drain out. So that probably ends up being the other 2. So I'll go ahead, fill up right now with the 4 quarts or the gallon. Then I'll go ahead and measure how much is in there, and I'll pump in that much on a quart. So next we'll go ahead, get up into here right about there, right here. It's a 24 millimeter, it has a WS on it for world standard. Go ahead and unbolt that. That's gonna be our fill plug to get this thing filled back up right here. That thing wasn't pretty tight at all. It just barely turned and it opened. For the transfer pump, it comes with like a 4-foot or 5-foot red hose right here, or orange hose. I went ahead, used some of my clear hose I bought on one side so I could see the transfer and see what's going on. On the intake side, which goes into here, I just took one of the tubes that came with it, and I cut it in half. The other tube is still in there full size. You don't need that full tube because it's just going to be a big old mess unless you're getting it from far away, but I want to keep these things near me in case they fall over or something. So this is pretty much how I'm going to set up right here. So make sure you have the clear one so you can see it. All right, we were able to fill the first gallon basically. That residual right there that I still have left at the bottom, I'm gonna go ahead and just fill it from the front when I do that. So I'll just leave it there and fill it up. But now we gotta put the plug back in. It comes with an O-ring on it already, and most likely this O-ring is gonna be fine. I went ahead and already purchased the new one because it was only like $2 or something like that. So I'll go ahead and swap that thing out. This thing is not under pressure and it's not even that tight from when we took it off. So it's just really a fill plug. So we'll go ahead, just swap that out and put it up. So next thing we want to do is go ahead, disconnect this hose right here. So this hose goes to the return. So this is where we're gonna pump the fluid into here. This right here coming out of the cooler, that's the supply. So that's the sending. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hook up one of our hoses. You can use the new clear one you have, or even the one from the transfer, connect it into a reservoir or a gallon. I'm gonna use a gallon jug right there that I have my other fluid in, or the old fluid. I'm gonna go ahead, turn the car on for about 20 to 25 seconds, shift through all the gears while it's in the air or on the ground, it doesn't matter. And then once you count to about 20 or 25 seconds, turn it off. That should empty about 2 to 2.5 quarts of fluid. I went ahead, connected it up, routed it into the gallon here. I did put a little bungee cord there, and I put a little clamp to hold the hose to the thing in case there's any kind of pressure or it sprays anywhere, which I don't think is gonna happen, but just in case, I wanna make sure that's in place for insurance. Next thing we're gonna do, go in the car, start the car up, count to about 20 to 25 seconds. Make sure while you're doing it, shift through all your gears from park all the way to D1, D2, whatever it is, and then back and forth for that 20 something seconds. All right, so that was like 20 something seconds worth. We pumped in about, I'd say 2 quarts or a little less than 2 quarts. We'll go ahead and measure that out in the new gallon and then pump in the new fluid. All right, I went ahead, filled out the new fluid right there. That's the pink looking one, the cleaner looking one. It's about the same level, just a little bit more. You wanna fill it up just because you're gonna end up having some residual back in the bucket or in the jug when you're trying to pump it in, but just in case, at the end we're going to end up topping it off anyway. So really, as long as we're close, we should be good on the level. So next we're going to do with the one that we filled up right there, we're going to go put the hose over here into that transfer pump and go ahead and pump it into the hose. I've got a barb fitting already on there into the existing hose, and we're just going to pump it through. So we got basically the first 6 quarts done. I'll continue this on a time lapse, and we'll see if we end up using all 16 of these. All right, so I've filled out 10 quarts already, and the last few have been pretty clear. You can see the bottle is starting to get kind of red inside. It's not that dark brown anymore or black. So we're starting to dilute it, and we're down to the last 4 quarts. So really, this is my last flush. I want to leave the last 2 quarts in case I have to top it off, and just extra. You never want to go all the way to the 16. So after about 14, you should be pretty good, and you've swapped maybe like 90 to 95% of the fluid already. So we'll go ahead, fill this thing up, and go ahead, get the last 2, and then we'll finish it up by heating up the transmission and then checking the overflow. See, this is quarts 13 and 14. You can see it's starting to get lighter and lighter every time. So this is the last flush we're gonna do. We'll go ahead, fill it back up, and then we'll go ahead and check the levels. All right, we got everything connected back up. So the next thing we need to do is go ahead and check the overflow. So what we need to do is warm the transmission up 115 degrees Fahrenheit to check the level of the fluid. Once you take that bolt off and you're within that temperature, anything excess of that will drain out. If nothing drains out, that means you have to put more fluid in and check again. To check the transmission temperature, in order to know that you're in the correct range to refill the transmission, you can either do the OBD2 2-pin jumping. I'll show on the screen the instructions for that if you guys need to know how to do it that way. Once you do it that way, you can go ahead and basically watch the D and the transmission temperature icon on the dash to know when it's ready to go. But for me, I want to do it the easy way. So I have this EDAG Elite right here, OBD2 reader. It's a Bluetooth OBD2 reader, and it also does all the functions of TechStream for the Toyota vehicles. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna just go plug it in, open the phone app, and then watch the temperatures and monitor them until we get between 115 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit on the transmission temperature sensor. Once we get up to temperature, what we're gonna do is leave the engine running. We're gonna go ahead and get underneath there, undo that check bolt, let the overflow drain out. Once it drains out with the engine still on to a trickle, we put the screw and the washer back on, and that's it. You basically topped off your transmission fluid to the correct. So we're gonna start the engine, pull up the app, and then sit here and monitor the temperatures until we hit the temperature range we need to be in. So it took us a few minutes to let it idle. So you got 2 temperature settings right here. The top temperature is probably the temperature after the cooler, because it's always lower than the lower number there. So we're gonna wait for that lower number to hit 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it hits 115 degrees Fahrenheit, we go ahead and go underneath and check the levels. Under here, you wanna be ready with your crush washer. Once you take that off and it drains, you wanna replace the crush washer immediately once it stops draining. You want to re-plug this thing up while the car's still idling, because once you turn the engine off, all the fluid that's in the transmission ends up down here again, and it's gonna try to drip out. So make sure you have this ready. When it stops dripping, put the cap back on, turn off the engine. All right, so when we took that thing out, nothing flowed out of it, which means we're short on fluid. So I'll go ahead, pump in maybe another half a quart of fluid just to be sure, and then we'll check again once it warms back. Instead of filling from the fill plug at the bottom, I'm just go ahead and do it from here. I just find it easier to access up front and pump it in than it is working underneath the car, especially when it's hot. So we got that thing all done. I went ahead, waited until it trickled and it started just kind of going down the side of the pan. Put a new crush washer and put that thing back in, tighten it down. So I'm gonna go ahead and move everything out of the way, clean it up, and I think we're pretty much done here. Make sure you check all your connections and clean up. Hey guys, thanks for joining me all the way to the end of this video on swapping out that transmission fluid on the GX470. As you can see, pretty straightforward overall as far as draining it, just changing everything and dropping it. As long as you get underneath, get all the connections and everything right, you should be good. I did use exactly 15 quarts of fluid, a little less than that once you drain it out, but I needed 15 quarts to fill everything back up. If you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel to stay on top of all my different DIY videos. For all these different projects, if I can do it, you guys can do it. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.